Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Self-Care for Carers webinar. My name is Aoife Kerwin. I'm the Information, Advocacy and Research Officer with MS Ireland. MS Ireland appreciate the tremendous work that carers do to support people living with MS across the country. And as part of National Carers Week, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Eileen Hopkins, life coach and psychotherapist, this evening to go through some of the tools and techniques that you can use to establish or enhance your self-care routine. If you have questions throughout the session, you can submit them through the chat box or through the Q&A function, and we'll get to them when we can. With that, I'm going to hand you over to Eileen, and our session is going to last approximately 50 minutes, I would say, give or take. So that's it. Eileen, welcome and thank you.
Thanks very much, Aoife, and thanks to you and MS Ireland for inviting me to talk about what I consider to be a really, really important subject. So, hi everyone. I'm going to move my slide now. Just bear with me now for a minute. Can I get this? Okay, so a little bit about me first. Well, my name is Eileen. I tell you a little bit about me, like my qualifications. I am a psychotherapist and I'm a coach, and I'm also a nurse. And I feel the relevance of me doing this talk being a nurse. I think that that's important and significant. I have nursed a lot of people who have MS. I have met families, I have met carers, and I know the job you do, and I know the toll it takes too. And for some people, when you mention the word self-care, the first thing is, sure, I don't have time for that. I'm so busy. But I'm hoping that as we go through this, you'll see a little bit more of the importance of it as we go along. So the areas that we're going to look at today, we're going to look at self-care and its importance. And then we look at the challenges to self-care, because for all of ye, there are huge challenges to self-care. Time being a big one, you know, and I'll share some tools that some of you may find of benefit. So looking now at definitions of self-care, there are many. And I'm not going to go through them all, but it's broadly defined as it's self-initiated behaviour that people choose to incorporate to promote good health and well-being. And the important words there are good health and well-being, because as carers, we're so focused on the health and the well-being of the person we're caring for. But if you think of it, if you think of pouring water from a jug and you pour and pour and pour, if we don't fill that jug up and it's empty, there's nothing left to pour. And for many people who are in a caring capacity, they are pouring, pouring, pouring the whole time. And their own health and well-being may be adversely affected in some cases, you know. So, as I said, it's a conscious and deliberate practice that means much more than just a tick box checklist to be completed. And I think we often see that with self-care, that self-care is going for a massage, going out for lunch, different things like that. But really, it's not so much that. It's more incorporating into your already busy schedule to see what little gaps that you can do, little things for yourself. Like, I'm thinking of a client that I've been working with, and she's really, really busy. She's working full time. She has small kids, and she kept saying to me, Eileen, I do not have a minute to myself and for self-care. But over time, what she started doing now, she's out in the car all day, a lot of her work. So she stops off at least once a day at, say, the likes of Starbucks or Costa or one of those. And she sits in the car and she has the cup of coffee. But she has it with the intention of, this is for me. Because how often do we get that cup of coffee or cup of tea and we're just drinking it down really quickly while we're doing something else? But for her, she couldn't add any other things into her day. So that one simple thing, and she said every day she looks forward to that. She said it's usually only 5 minutes, but it's intentional and it's deliberate and it's for her. So like they do say there's so much on self-care, but it can improve social relationships, heighten self-esteem, increased energy and effectiveness, to mention but a few things. So when I put up this image of this lovely person sitting in their chair with their cushions saying self-care isn't selfish, I wonder how you feel about that. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's wrongish? You know, and feel free to put something in the chat if you have a comment to make on that, because self-care for a lot of people, it sounds really indulgent, but it's a vital part of our physical, mental and emotional health, especially as a carer. And, you know, I'm quite sure some of you have heard the saying, and it was certainly something my mother would have said to me, well, you've been very good to yourself, aren't you? You know, there's that kind of a criticism when you're doing something for you, or when you're saying, actually, I need a bit of time for me. And you'll hear somebody saying, God, you've been very nice to yourself and very good to yourself, you know? So like, I would love to hear what you think of that statement anyway.
Eileen, if you'd like to come in there, we do actually, we did
Great.
receive a question in advance of
yeah
on this, and it was I suppose more a statement from somebody who said that they know that self-care is important for them for maintaining their health and being able to support the person that they love, but their partner's family seem to be very judgmental of the fact that they take some time for themselves, and they find that difficult to navigate. And you know, there is comment there that people can feel that their self-care time is selfish. So it's definitely a feeling that's present in carers.
It is, and you know, it's something that's put out there to us a lot. And I know even in my previous life as a nurse, you know, if you were saying, you know, on a day off, actually, I'm not doing that because I need some time for me, you'll have people saying, God, you're really fond of yourself now, aren't you? You know, but I hope that as we go through this tonight, that you'll get some more ideas, number one, of the importance of it and different ways to incorporate it in. Communicating it to other people, yes, that is a challenge with some people, you know. Some people, I think, especially like when you think of in organizations now and in businesses, there's a lot more focus on the importance of self-care. And like the likes of MS Ireland having, you know, and having this carers week, like that in itself is testament to how important it is seen. But as we go through, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So my next, it's a question really, what does that whole concept of self-care mean to you? Like why might it be important for you as a carer to consider? So I'm asking that as a question, and hopefully as we go through this, we'll have an answer to that. So when we look at self-care, I love this image, and it's from Knott's, and it's taking care of myself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. And the cornerstones of self-care, there's three main areas. There's our physical health, our physical wellness, nourishing relationships, and well-maintained boundaries. And I'm going to touch on the area of the boundaries first. And there's a quote, and I don't know who said it, but I think it's so, so true. You can love somebody unconditionally, but with boundaries. And boundaries are, I suppose it's a way of putting our needs out there. It's knowing when to say no. And if you think of it, when you say yes to somebody else and something else, you are always saying no to something else. And normally it's to yourself. And as carers, we are giving because it's what's needed. But sometimes there are times when we have to actually pull back and say, actually, hold on, I actually need a bit of help here. It may be reaching out to family, to the health service, to whatever, or it may be to the person you're caring for. Sometimes when people are in need of care, it's try to be boundaried in that, because sometimes the demands from that person can be so that it's really taken its toll on you. So that's a really important one. The physical health, well, obviously, you know, that goes without saying. Number one, there's the whole area of your physical wellness. You know, are you lifting? Are you bending? Have you, you know, if this person needs lifting, have you a hoist? You know, I know there are some people who will refuse to use a hoist or to be hoisted because, you know, they don't want it, but they're expecting, say, the likes of you as the carer and carers to lift. And that's like, I mean, again, it's pouring and pouring and pouring from the jug and not refilling it. Because if you're in that capacity where you are lifting and dragging and pulling somebody, your own back is going to go. And what use are you then to that person if you know, if that's happening? Other areas of physical health, diet, nutrition, we're going to look at that a little bit later on. So nourishing relationships, and that's actually, you know, if you think, for any of you caring, before you got into this role, which you really didn't look for, I'm sure you had your own friends, you had people around you, you had other relationships, and often what tends to happen is all those other friendships, relationships are pushed to the back, and your identity becomes, say, my name is Eileen Hopkins, so my identity becomes Eileen Hopkins carer, and all those other roles that were part of your life are kind of pushed into the background. And again, it's to look at ways that we can start, I suppose, in a way, looking at opportunities to reach out to people and to look at those, you know. So reflecting now on your role right now, I often laugh when I see this slide because, you know, your role isn't just carer. Like, I'm sure you're, you know, you're a neighbor, you're a cousin, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're a friend, you're a boss, you're a daughter, you know, the list goes on and on. And, you know, where are those roles going to? Like, what, you know, what roles are you owning, I suppose, for want of a better word? And there's a whole list of them there. But which are the most important? And which are you more comfortable with? And which do you find more difficult? You know, and again, for each of you, I can't answer that for you, but it's something to think about and, you know, to reflect on, you know. And it's, how do you juggle all these roles? Like, you know, I often get the image, you know, sometimes with clients, of the juggling the balls, and you're juggling and juggling and juggling, but eventually one of the balls is going to fall, you know. So it's, how are you juggling that, and what do you need in that? So the role of a caregiver, like, it's, you know, there's no way I can tell you all the parts of your role, but it's thinking about, you know, your current situation, which involves caring and supporting others. And something I would often ask people, is this the sort of a role you've always played in your life in different ways? And I remember when that question was asked of me some years ago, like initially I was a nurse, then a life coach, psychotherapist. And I remember somebody saying, have you always played this role? And for me, I always did. And for me, I always had that need to be needed. And I think a lot of us in different ways have that need to be needed. And that's, I don't feel that that's a criticism saying that. Sometimes it's recognizing it. Because when we have that need to be needed the whole time, we often find it a lot harder to reach out, to ask for help, to accept help when it's been offered, you know? So, like if it was a chosen role, or is it one that you felt you had to play? And as a carer, it's rarely a chosen role, you know? Aoife, are there any other questions at this point, or will I keep going?
There are no more questions have come through the chat box, Eileen, but I know that somebody else had emailed in advance of it as well to kind of outline the fact that they became a carer, during their relationship, I suppose. So the original relationship that they entered into was not one of a care recipient, and they are just mindful of wanting to keep the traditional roles that they had and what they initially took on, but now they have this role of carer and care recipient, but they don't want that to become the main thing. So I think that kind of the dual labeling is something that's really, really important to discuss and to realize that, as you say, there are different, I suppose there are different times when each of those things are more important. So, during a caring time, you are a carer in that scenario, you're still a wife or a husband, or a son or whatever it is. But, at other times, when it's just a normal time, you don't think of yourself as a carer. And also that many people who provide support don't consider themselves to be carers at all.
Yeah. And I think especially with MS, Aoife, because, it's during the flare-ups and that your role as a carer is more, well, it's more needed. But if the person is going into remission, there's still, I suppose, a caring bit in the back of your head. But you want to carry on a normal relationship as much of a normal life as you can. And that can be difficult. That can be very difficult for the person who's caring, because they're not sure when it's going to start again. If
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying there? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for this person, the issue that they outlined was that they don't want the relationship to become just that they, what they entered into was a loving relationship with their partner, and they want to be able to maintain that above all else.
Yeah, and that's where accepting help and looking for help is so important, because for that person, say, if they're giving, so pouring, they have no time or energy for any other parts of the relationship and or of other relationships. So it's the importance of sometimes saying no, and I don't mean saying no to the person you're caring for, but if there's extraordinary demands put on you as the carer, it's sometimes saying, actually, something, actually I'm tracking back here, something I would often have heard people saying, if I a patient in the ward and there was a carer, their family member, and they would say, but sure, he won't have anyone else in. I'm the only person they trust. They won't have anyone else into the house. And this is where boundaries and needs come in. It's saying, I am there for you. I want to be there for you, but I need some help, because if you take on that with no help, because that's what the person wants. Obviously, you want to do the best for them, but you have to think of yourself in it too.
Yeah, I suppose it has to be a sustainable thing. And if
it has, absolutely.
Not sustainable.
Yeah, and like if there are family members will offer for a while, or friends will offer for a while. But if you, as the carer, keep saying, no, I'm doing okay, and you want to be seen to do okay, they'll stop offering, they'll stop asking. you know. So, you know, it's a very difficult one. It's a really, really difficult one. There's no easy answer to it, you know.
And I'd just like to say as well to the people who have joined the webinar, if you do
Yeah,
want to send something through the chat, you can send it through. You have the option on that to select who you want to send it to. So you can send it to the panelists. Nobody will see your name and we won't read out any names. So what you say in the chat will be absolutely confidential, as long as you select that option to us that other participants wouldn't see your name. If you do want to say anything,
yeah.
that we can bring in at any point.
And even if your name shows on the question, like Aoife or myself won't be reading out your name, do you know? And yeah, okay. So anyway, I'm going to move on from that one now. Okay. So this is a little, what would you call it? It's a little analogy that I was first introduced to probably a few years ago. It's called Selfcare lobster style. And I'm sure you all know what a lobster is. But do you know how lobsters grow? Like, the lobster is a soft, kind of a mushy animal, and it has a hard, rigid shell. So with a hard, rigid shell, how can it grow? Well, when the shell gets really heavy and confining, the lobster goes under a rock, it casts off the shell and produces a new one. And that shell becomes too heavy, and then the same thing over and over again. So for the lobster, the stimulus to grow starts to feel uncomfortable, and then they know they have to go take off this shell and put on a new one. So they know by that weight of the shell that they need to stop, essentially, to look after themselves. And in this analogy, they say if lobsters had doctors, then they would never grow, because when they're uncomfortable, the doctor will give them, say, something like, you know, if they're stressed, if they're burnt out, you know, they get some medication, and they'll never get the opportunity to grow themselves, you know. And times of stress for many are often times of growth, and I don't mean just physical growth, you know. And when we recognize and when we use our adversity properly, we can grow through it, you know. And I just love that analogy because I think it's a really simple way of showing the importance of self-care and how this lobster knows when they need to get rid of the shell and do something for themselves. And, you know, for any of you listening now, how do you know when enough is enough or when too much is too much? Is your body telling you? Like for me, again, I know if I start getting tightness across my shoulders, that's my stress signal. And then I know, okay, what's going on, Eileen? What do you need? But for any of you, do you ever know when it's time to pause, when you need the help, when you need the support? So now I'm going to look at the challenges to self-care, because look, I know there are huge challenges to self-care. And if you look at your woman here, like there's meetings, there's people to call, there's maybe reaching out to doctors, reaching out to all the multidisciplinary people that you know that are involved in the care of this person you're looking after. You know, there's so many challenges. You know, time, again, time, as I said, time is a big one, you know. And, you know, again, I always use little stories that come to me. Again, somebody else I was talking to, and they were saying, but I never have time, never have time. And when I was talking to this person was looking after an elderly relative who had a stroke. But this client was saying how she used to love to go to the gym, but there was no way she had time now. So we started to look at that, and there was, you know, in the morning her son used to come in, or somebody used to come into the house, and it was looking at how instead of taking on any new self-care practice, this is something that she had, but she hadn't had the time for it. So she started going for a swim in the gym when her son or somebody would come in the morning. And I think sometimes she had a carer in from the HSC in the morning. So she started using that time as her self-care. And it's not looking for more ways to practice it, but like she started to notice in doing that when she did that, she'd come back in much better form. She'd be more relaxed. She'd probably have chatted to a few people, you know. So that's just one little example. But as you all know, it's the times you'll have something planned, there'll be some complications, some setback. And like you could have this gorgeous plan like this guy here, and you think it's a straight road. But the reality is, especially when you have somebody with a long-term illness, it dips and it's up and down and up and down, you know. And it's, you know, sometimes I describe it as surfing the waves. Like, you know, you're constantly surfing the waves because, say, somebody gets an infection, you know, a flare up, has to have procedure, different things, and then that's that person. But it's all the other people in your family and your life. If something else is going on, it all impacts, you know, one thing on top of another. And it's in there, Aoife, will I keep going?
Oh, sorry, you can keep going, Eileen, if you like.
Keep going. Okay, no problem. I'm now going to talk about the area of burnout. And, you know, for those of you who are here, I suppose the first thing I have to ask is, have you ever felt burnt out? And I'm going to look at a little bit of it here. But if there's ever anything you've experienced in this, please, again, put it in the chat, because some other people can gain from your experiences, learn from them, you know. Burnout is characterized as physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, and it can lead to dulled emotions, to detachment. And for those experiencing it, essentially, like, every day is a bad day. And those of us who are caring, a lot of us in a caring role are very empathetic. And when we're strong empaths, we're much more likely to burn out. Like for me in nursing, I burnt out in my latter years of nursing, which is why the career change. And I know myself, it's something I have to be careful of. And the biggest thing I've had to learn to do is to say no, knowing that when I'm saying no to something, I'm saying yes to me. And I know that as I'm saying this, you're probably saying, oh, it's all right for her. She doesn't know what I'm going through. She doesn't know what it's like for me. I don't know what it's like for you. And I struggle to imagine for some of you how difficult it is. So please don't think that I'm pontificating here telling you how wonderful I am and that you should be able to manage this, because I'm not. So, but the one thing, if you look at this fuel tank here, like, at what stage do you stop to refill your fuel tank? And I don't know for any of you, is that a familiar thing? Look, getting into your car and on red, and I'm afraid it's very familiar for me. So do you wait until that red light is flashing? And we can apply this analogy to ourselves, to our bodies, and to our minds. Do we wait until we become so stressed and burned out? And the time we take to fill up the tank, to refuel, to fill up the jug, it's an investment in our long-term self-care and resilience. And it empowers and enables us to be better at what we're doing, for ye to be better carers, you know. And the thing that I've been referring to there is the jug. And this was Leslie Lobel, and she said, you can't keep giving to others without giving to yourself first. It's like pouring water from a vessel. You cannot pour and pour without refilling it, because eventually it's going to run dry. Has anybody any comments on that or any questions on that?
Eileen, somebody had written in that during COVID, particularly, the supports that they had in place
were gone.
Were gone, and also their access to the self-care outlets that they had were also gone. So it was 24-hour caring with no break and no support. So I think burnout, burnout is something that definitely, particularly
Absolutely.
through COVID, not that you need COVID to feel burnout.
No.
I think there was definitely more of it. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even if you had carers coming in, I know for a lot of people who would have had carers coming in to support them, they chose not to have the carers coming in, because I know what it's like. For there's very few of you lucky enough to have, if you have a carer, to have the same person the whole time. You might have somebody on a Monday, somebody on a Thursday. And the fear for a lot of people was knowing that those carers were going into other houses and to other people. And I think that has been, honestly, I feel sometimes with all that, I'm at a loss for words, because even daycare was gone, all the different things that give you that little bit of respite, you know. But I'm hoping for many of you now that we're hopefully coming out of it a bit, and vaccinations, whatever, that, that some of these things will be coming back in, and try to avail of any of them that you can get, you know. Like it's a very difficult situation, and the COVID certainly has put an awful lot of stress on people who are caring at home. Even for me in nursing, I did a lot of work nursing with children, and for parents with very ill kids, like they didn't have any of the supports they would normally have. I don't have an answer that'll make that easier, but I can only begin to imagine what it's like.
And do you have any tools for people, I suppose, or tips for trying to maintain a self-care routine when they do have limited access to support and limited, ability to go places? So can they do things in their own home? Can
Yeah,
they?
and I will be sharing some tools and some little things in a while. And most of the ones that I've shared are a minute or 2 minutes. And sometimes it's those things that can make the difference. So I will be sharing some of those in a few minutes, Aoife.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right. Okay, no problem at all. Now, I always, in every talk I do, I talk about Gabor Mate. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him. He's a Canadian physician, and he has done a lot of work on trauma and the body. And he has devised a course there about 2 years ago, and it's called Compassionate Inquiry. And I did that course, and it was amazing. But like what he says is, the way to get through these terrible times is to let them make you sad. Like, how many of you have been able to let, the pressure of the whole COVID, to let it, to feel it, because you're so busy trying to be seen to be coping and dealing with everything. And he said that when we notice the tension in ourselves, it's time to be with it, to accept it, and to give it quiet attention. And the reason he says that is often deeper and more authentic feelings will emerge. And if you can share these with somebody that you can trust, like a friend or something like that, because I can imagine for a lot of you with the whole thing with COVID, you were trying to keep things as normal as you could for your loved one or the person you were caring for, but you were holding it all like it was, and pushing it down. And when we push it down and down, all those emotions, they eventually, as somebody said, where there's tension, it needs attention. And that attention could be a trusted friend or somebody, even to talk on the phone and say, I am having a crap day. I am really struggling at the moment. And like in COVID, obviously they couldn't even come to your house, but it's even to have a little outlet that you can talk about, that you can even, in a way, I call it like, it's like the volcano, and it's letting a bit of the lava out at the top. When you get to release and to talk about it with somebody, it can make such a difference, and it can make it that you're able to keep going a little bit better. And again, I'm going to talk about other supports and things now in a few minutes. Now, I always put up the next slide because I think, especially over the last while with lockdown, with COVID, social media has become nearly our buddy, our friend in a way, like, because it's been our outlet, able to connect with the world, you know. But sometimes the 24/7 engagement with the instant messaging can bring on stress, you know, because it's relentless. And some people say that they stay on their devices out of a habit. Other people, it's a distraction. It's a, you know, if you're awake at night, it's kind of like a little bit of connection in a way, you know. And I suppose there's no right or wrong with this, and I'm not going to tell anybody you should or shouldn't do this, but it's trying, you know, to follow accounts that make you feel good, and to ignore if there's some post on something and there's a real negative thread. It's noticing if something is making you feel angry or upset or depressed or whatever, you know, and maybe they're not the right ones to be following, especially at the moment. Limiting the use of devices can also help, because when we're looking at a device, especially at night time, you know, the light on your phone, it's a blue light, and it's giving your brain a message that it's daytime. And for some people who are able to sleep, that's grand, but for somebody who has difficulty sleeping, it's even trying an hour or two before you go to bed to limit those devices. And if you're awake during the night, to try not to click into it. And I know that's easier said than done. And I know if I wake up during the night, I will often click into my phone. I'm sharing this as advice. It's not easy for everybody to, you know, to do what's the best thing at the time, you know. So I'm going to share a few little tools and techniques. Like, there's so many, but I'm just going to, you know, there's a few that I feel are quite good, and I'm going to just roughly talk about them. So there's 3 or 4 that I'm going to look at. There's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's a stop exercise, breathing exercises, and ways to calm the anxious mind, and mindfulness. Now, I'm going to literally, in the time we have, do literally a whistle-stop tour of these. But these are on the slides, they're which Aoife will have. And if there's any of these, you know, sometimes one of them you'd think, oh God, that'd be one that I could try. You know, all of them won't work for you, you know, but it's to notice if any one of them resonate with you, you know. So the first one, I love this one because it's so instant and so quick. And like, even now, if we do it now, for those of you who are in the room, or even if you're watching the recording, it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So as you're sitting, wherever you're sitting now, just look around you and see, is there 5 things you can see? And like, for example, I can see my computer, I can see paper, I can see my phone, I can see my cup of tea, you know, I can see my notice board. So there are 5 things you can see. Is there 4 things you can touch? And again, there's different things, like, for example, you can touch your hand, you can touch your hair, the table, the cup, whatever. 3 things you can hear around you. And again, I'm just giving examples. For me, you know, I can hear my computer buzzing. I can actually hear birds singing outside. And what else? I can hear something else, whatever. Sometimes you can't even hear it. To think of something you can hear. 2 things you can smell. And again, if you can't smell anything at the moment, is to think of something, a smell you like. Like, for example, I can smell my herbal tea, which I love. I can smell hand cream on my hand. And 1 thing you can taste. And again, if there's nothing you can taste, like I could taste my tea if I drank it now. But that may seem a kind of a silly exercise, but if you're in a really highly stressed situation, and maybe the person you're caring for, maybe you're getting a bit frustrated with them, maybe you just got angry with the doctor when you rang them, whatever, to literally just, that will take you less than a minute. Now, I've it's taken me a little bit longer because I was explaining it to you. Like I say to people, do it in your hand. Do it in your hand. 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear, you know. And it's, what that does is when you're very stressed, your cortisol level is sky high. I usually use my head, it's up to here, you know. And even doing that for that minute, it's bringing your cortisol level down a bit. And when our cortisol level is persistently up here, it's hard to focus on things. And also a persistently high cortisol level, as in lots of stress, can affect our health. So it's doing something like that, even if it brings it down a bit, and it probably will go back up. But it's a little thing you could do. You could do it many times a day, you know. So that's the first one. And look, I know I'm racing through these, but just bear with me. Aoife, I see a few numbers in the chat. Is there any question at the moment, or will I keep going?
You can keep going. That was just me providing my contact details to
Oh, okay.
if they would like to request the slides, and letting them know that the recording will be on our website in the coming days.
Right. Okay, no problem at all. So the next one, and this one, I actually have this one printed out, and it's on my fridge downstairs. It's in my office. I have it in a few places of the house, and it's called the stop technique. And it's when you find yourself overwhelmed, to try this, to literally stop what you're doing, to take a step back, to try, if you can, to disengage from the situation. And it's taking a break and putting everything off just for those few minutes, and just pausing. And the T then, to take a deep breath, and another, to give yourself essentially a couple of seconds, say 15 seconds of just focusing on your breath. And sometimes it helps when you're doing that to put your hand on your tummy and feel the breath moving through your body. And this is something, this little one, or any of these, are ones that you could do with the person you're caring for, you know, to just say, look, actually, I'm a bit stressed at the moment. Why don't we both do this? And sometimes when you're taking the breath, sometimes what some people find helpful is to imagine that you have a big red balloon in your tummy, and to breathe in, and you're going to blow up that balloon. So you're literally big breath, and then let all that air out, you know. And it's literally, you know, do that 2 or 3 times, you know. And then the next thing is the O, observe. It's to notice your thoughts, and notice how your body is feeling, and to name the emotions you're feeling, and to consider why you're feeling that way. And with no judgment, but just noticing, like, what am I reacting to? What am I thinking and feeling now? And, you know, as I said, there's no right or wrong way to be and to do this. And the next one, P, which is proceed, or there's a few words there, but it's to move forward in an intentional way that respects and honors your needs and feelings. What will really make you feel better or help you to cope? And it's about practicing what works. Like, what can I do about this? What's actually within my control? What's realistic for me to do? And what would help? And what's the best thing in this situation? Like, for me, for others. So that's the second one. And the next one is all about breathing and the power of the breath, which I've touched on in that one. And there are so many different breathing exercises, but I don't know if any of you have heard of the polyvagal theory. We have this nerve going from here the whole way down to our tummy, and it's the vagus nerve. And when we're very stressed and maybe hyper agitated or whatever, the transmission from the head down through the vagus nerve is kind of in some way disrupted. And the breath is the best way to essentially to regulate ourselves. And a really useful one in that, it's in whatever way you do it, there's a few different ones, but it's a slower out breath than your in breath, so that your out breath is slower. For example, breathe in for 4 seconds, breathe out for 6. And in that, it's, if your shoulders are up here, it's just relaxing your shoulders. Notice whatever feelings are there and see, if you can allow them to be there, if you can accept them, if you can give yourself permission to take that little pause. And it's again, then, it's knowing what steadies yourself, because like I'm telling you all these different ones, but it's the important thing is knowing what works for you, what's realistic for you in the situation. And it's, fixing your course to star and you can navigate the storm, according to Da Vinci. I don't know, did Da Vinci ever have to care for anyone? But anyway, that's what he says. So I'm just putting it up there. So now this is another one, and this is a little bit longer, but it's 7 ways to ease your anxious mind. And the first thing is to slow down. And when we slow our physical movements, we're also slowing the big washing machine going on in our head. And I know if you're trying to look after somebody, look after a house, look after everything's in fast. And everything we do is fast. Even eating is fast. Everything becomes fast. And sometimes it's making that deliberate effort to slow down. Even if you think, maybe you're feeding the person you're with, maybe you're washing them, and instead of rush, to try and maybe slow down a little bit when you're doing it. And, that's with everyday tasks, not just one thing. And the next thing is to take news and social media with a grain of salt. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by anxious thoughts when we're reading the headlines, especially the last while with COVID and everything. It's so easy, and if somebody else around you is very anxious, remember, anxiety is really contagious. Like, if you're normally somebody who's fairly calm and there's somebody around you who's very anxious, that anxiety, it's hard to escape it because it's contagious. But like with the news and social media, it's limiting our exposure to things that are making us feel anxious, and look at the things that empower us, that make us feel better, that kind of fill us a bit, I suppose. Building certainty into your day. For some people, mindfulness practice, they help us to be okay with uncertainty. But it's also okay to build in elements of certainty, and like that can be around routine, around exercise, sleep, the time you go to bed, different things like that. The next one, come to your senses throughout the day. And essentially that's to ease your mind, to ease your worried mind. And some of those tools that I shared with you can really help that pause, even for a minute, maybe twice, 3 times a day, Releasing the critic, that critic that's saying, you're not doing good enough a job. You're not, you're not doing the things the way somebody else would do them. You're doing a blinking good job to be doing what you're doing, to be able to care for the person you're caring for in the best way you can. And, when you hear that critical voice from others, or sometimes from yourself, it's about challenging it and remind yourself that you don't need to compare how you're caring, how you're handling the situation compared to others. And that can sometimes be where groups like Facebook pages, things like that, where we tend to compare how we're doing something to somebody else. And that can cause a lot of unnecessary pressure and stress. And doing a reality check. And again, oftentimes anxiety confuses possibility with probability. And Byron Katie, if any of you ever heard of her, she has 4 questions that she asks. I have to read them now because I can never remember them. You know, when you have, say, a thought going on in your head, is this thought true? How does this thought make me feel? What does it make me want to do? And what would I do if this thought wasn't here? And with the answers to these questions in mind, you should be able to judge, like, as I said, possibility and probability with a clearer distinction between the two. And finally, number 7 there is to look up and listen. And if you can, go outside, lie down, look up at the sky and listen. And like, you know, if you're caring for somebody, even if they're wheelchair bound, try to get out for a little walk or get out into the garden, or, you know, to use that as a little bit of your chance to get out, to get a little bit of exercise. And it's good for them too, to get out and get a bit of air, you know. So it's in that 7, it's exploring and experimenting with which of these you notice and which of these are of help to you. Now, I also have there, I have a mindfulness practice. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave it up there. And if any of you want to do it, it'll be on the slides. And please feel free to do it. There are so many. Look, I don't push mindfulness on any of my clients or anyone, because for some people in the busyness of everything, the talking about mindfulness is just too much. But what I do say to people is take the mindful moments. And the mindful moment could be you get into the shower, just notice the water coming down on you and actually nearly even visualize it washing some of your stress away. Like, how many times are you in the sink washing your hands? Then maybe when you're washing your hands, just drop your shoulders. Maybe take a breath in and out. Look at those little moments. If you're folding, washing, if you're anything like that, just take that little moment, you know. And I mean, mindfulness for some people is amazing, but sometimes it can put a lot of pressure on us to be something that we really can't be at the moment, you know. But like when we are, that's what I say, mindful moments, like when we are mindful, we can connect more with what's going on for us and with our experience. And Viktor Frankl once said that the last of human freedoms is one's ability to choose one's attitude in a given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. And there are times you will better be able to choose your attitude, to choose the attitude that you want. But there are other times that that's not possible. So as we're coming to the end, and I'd really invite you to maybe put a word or two in the chat when I ask this question. As you can see, there's the car and it's driving along the motorway. And when you look in the rear view mirror and you look back at this whistle stop tour, which is absolutely what it was, what do you see differently in your rear view mirror now as we finish today? And if anybody has a comment or would like to say anything on that, please feel free to. And I'm going to share a few resources that may be of use, because while self-care is important, it's also, I suppose, it's impossible if you're struggling as a carer and that your mental and physical well-being, that you know, it's important to know that there is some help and support out there. The first port of call, your GP, and I say the word should because some GPs are better than others, to connect you with some supports, and where possible to talk to a trusted friend or relatives so that they're also aware of how you're feeling and maybe can check in or offer a little bit of support. And there's also, I have just a few organisations here that, you know, obviously first and foremost, the MS Ireland, and their telephone number is there. There's the Samaritans, there's the HSC have a free text service for people going through mental health or emotional crisis. Pieta House for people who are suicidal or bereaved by suicide and aware. Like, there are a few, there are so many more, but I've just put them up there And these are a few resources. The HSC Health and Wellbeing, they have a free online stress control class. It's really good. And what's really good about it is you can do it in your own time. It's free, but you know, they share a lot of the videos and the recordings of it up on YouTube. It's a really, really good resource. And the fact that it's something you can click into in your own time, you don't say have to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning to do it or whatever, you know. And then that one at the top, the National Wellness Institute, they often have some good presentations on that on wellness. Now, I am going to take a breath, and if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to shout. Aoife, over to you. Is there anything there?
So, Eileen, a few, I think it's in the reflections.
Great.
Self-care is important. Self-care is not selfish. Mindfulness is a bit of a chore, but mindful moments are something I can work into my day. And taking time for myself is an important task too.
It's filling that jug so that you can keep pouring it into the other people that you're the person you're looking after, you know. And honestly, if you take that much from today and take some of the pressure off yourselves, acknowledge what you are doing, try and avoid comparing to other people. Maybe you know somebody else who has a loved one that they're caring for, but to try to avoid comparing how they're doing, what they're doing, and what you're not doing. Do you know, be kind to yourself. You're doing a blinking great job. Thank you.
That's great. Eileen, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. And I do hope that the carers who have joined us this evening will take those tools and tips and be able to apply them at different times to help relieve the pressure on themselves and ensure that they are prioritising self-care as part of their day. And thank you again to the carers who are providing support to people with MS across the country. As I said earlier, you do tremendous work and it is much appreciated by all of us in MS Ireland. Eileen, thank you once again for a fantastic session. Really appreciate the work that you've put into this and the wonderful tools and techniques that you've provided here this evening. So that brings it to an end. Thank you everybody for joining us. And we look forward to hearing from you if you want to access the slides. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.